free time element is still so very important. I have time for me, I have time for the relationship, and I had time for my job. And when you go into this idea of there being children around, you have to work out how that's going to sit within the relationship part, and how some of your free time that you gave up for the relationship is also now free time that's being given up for the relationship with children. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Single Girl's Guide to Your Life. I'm Chantel Dyson, a love and life coach, helping women to make the right decisions in their life, whether that's living on your own, embracing your single life, or dating. And in today's episode, we are delving into the dating section because we're going to take a little bit of a look at one of the options that you have when you're dating that you might not be sure about, that you swing like a pendulum back and forth as to whether you should date someone like this or shouldn't date someone like this. And that is the topic of whether you should date someone that has children already. And at any point during this episode, if you have an aha moment, I want you to screenshot the moment you're on, share it to your Instagram stories, and give me a little tag explaining what it is that has really clicked for you, what it is that you're thinking about. I want to know what this podcast and any podcast of mine that you listen to is bringing up for you. So make sure you screenshot, share it on Instagram, and tag me too. But let's get on with the topic of today. As you will be getting older, as you progress through in this experience, it is inevitable that eventually some of the people that come up on your dating apps will have children. That's already an option. But as you start to move through into your 30s, even your 40s, the likelihood of somebody having a child from a previous relationship, one in which they may have been in for a number of years, maybe even been married in, and have done that through their 20s and some of their 30s, means that they might have children, a child. And therefore, when they're dating, that is an option that's going to, over time, eliminate more people naturally. Because if you go with the route of, I don't want to date anybody that has children, which is a fair decision that you can make, but it's one that you should know will reduce your dating pool as time goes on. Because the probability that someone won't have had an interaction in some way and might not have had children in that time is going to reduce over time, because we know through all the episodes of this podcast that there is that trajectory that people are on, and we don't always consciously think about whether we really want children or not. It's something that we think we want and we're told that we should want, and that's what creates a happy and fulfilling life. And that's sometimes why people have children. And whilst they might go, it's a lot harder than I ever realised sometimes, and they might go, had I thought about it, I might have thought differently. They wouldn't wish their children away. And so that means that we're going to have lots of people potentially that have children from previous partnerships. I've spoken previously about the idea that I believe we will have more long-term relationships that don't stand the test of time, even if they last good chunks of time. Rosie Wilby talks about this in the idea of is monogamy dead, and the breakup monologues of the concept that people will just have multiple long-term monogamous relationships over time, that they will have people that they're with for 10, 15 years, then another person for another 10, 15 years, and then another person for another 10, 15 years. The idea of being with one person until the end of time is not realistic, really. And so during one of those longer periods of time with people, having a child might be a thing. And this might even get you thinking about what the reality might be for you if you're going, well, I thought that I did want children and that was something I was thinking that I wanted. If you do that, you kind of commit to a lifelong partnership with that person, regardless of if your relationship lasts that amount of time. And obviously, most people expect that their relationship will stand the test of time. It will be something in which they raise the children together until the very end. But think of the reality of that. To get the children or a child through to their own adult point is 18 years. So you're putting bets on yourself that you be together for 18 years. And I always think, and this is what I contemplate when I consider the idea of children for myself, is what are the chances that I will at some point potentially be a single parent? And is that a prospect that I want? Now you might go, that's pessimistic, Chantal. I thought you were optimistic. You claim to be optimistic. I'm optimistic but pragmatic. I can still hope and do all the things that I would think to try and make sure that that is not the inevitable outcome if I decided to have children. However, I'm also very pragmatic and like, okay, well, the numbers are like this, right? And you can't document relationships that are current and alive and the ones that are broken up. We only have really the measure of marriage because that's the legal point at which you know someone's in a relationship or not. So it's very hard to think about the statistics. And I think, well, it's a 42% divorce rate in the UK, 50% or so in America is what they believe, 40-50% somewhere. That's marriages. What about relationships? So that number of people that don't stay together must be higher. And so I think, wow. So that feeds in. Now, that's not what we're talking about today, but it might be something that's starting to go around in your mind. And to understand how inevitable it is that the dating pool will be full of more and more people that have children of different ages. And this came to particular light for me when I started to date in general, but specifically dated someone with children. When I first started dating, I knew I wasn't loving the idea of someone having children, but I did go on first dates with people that had children. First and second and third dates, actually, with a couple of people. There are two distinct people that I'm aware of that had children. I did meet their children. That was a very casual affair. That's why. So it wasn't that the relationship had become committed and we'd done this strategic introduction to the children. It so happened that I was in the same place they were and they happened to have their daughter with them. So we went for a coffee. That was how that one had worked out. But ultimately, the idea was not like introductions of any notable point. It was literally as a friend that I was meeting this person in that sense. It's not an idea that I'm completely closed off of, but as I then toyed with the idea of do I want children or not, it's then one of those that I was more tentative against. And at certain points, it was something I said, no, I don't want. I don't think I want that. And that was because my thinking was the freedom around it. When you have children, and this was what I believed before I started dating someone with children, what I was observed of the people around me and what I observed from my experience as a teacher and listening to parents and thinking about how it must work is that, especially when they're little, their lives take over your lives. And people might go, yeah, that's obvious. Oh, but they like everything. It is an identity that you adopt as a parent and your life revolves around those children. And some people are completely up for that and prepared for that. And my mindset, predominantly at this point, is still about me. And that's interesting, and I'll talk to you about how that has progressed since dating someone. But at the time, particularly so when I was going, no, I don't want kids and don't want to interact with anyone that's got kids, was because I wanted that freedom. I had been in my previous relationship since I was 19 to 26. I didn't then want to date someone that had particular things that would limit our time, that would limit where we would be going. Now, that was 3 years ago, and that has transformed in that way. And I do have levels of freedom, and I still think there's elements to be had within that. But when someone has children, there is a schedule to work with. There is a schedule that works between them and an ex-partner, probably, whether that's that they see them on weekends or they have them the majority of time, or it's 50-50. You know, you don't know the scenario when you see that someone says they have kids already in their profile or when they bring that up. You don't know how much it is of their life that is run by children. And that was their choice, and that is their life decision. And you have the decision as to whether you want to start engaging with that life limitation. Again, that might sound really negative or pessimistic, but that's the reality of having kids. They are alive the same way as having a dog. Like, I don't have a dog. I love dogs to pieces. And yet when I had my dog that sadly had to be put down not long after she came back here, she was just too poorly. The 2 weeks or so, 3 weeks that I had her for, I was like, oh my God, it is like having a child. I think it was worse because she was unwell and there were so many toilet accidents. Walking wasn't a problem. That was no big deal. But she couldn't get up and down the stairs so easily. It felt like what I imagine being a carer is like, because she was in her late stage and she needed picking her up and she was having accidents, and it was hard work even just for those 3 weeks, and I was on my own. Let's not forget that it was during COVID too, so it wasn't like she was being dropped around anywhere else. And I was checking on the camera because I was checking like has she had an accident whilst she's been away. And so whilst having children may not be so stressful as looking after a poorly dog, it still has the same commitment level because you can't leave a child on their own, not at that early age. And so there's the routines of whether it's nursery, school, after school clubs, and it's also free time. To me, and from the experience I've had, the free time element is still so very important. I have time for me. I have time for the relationship, and I had time for my job. And when you go into this idea of there being children around, you have to work out how that's going to sit within the relationship part, and how some of your free time that you gave up for the relationship is also now free time that's being given up for the relationship with children. Now, that doesn't have to come early on in the relationship. It's something that can be taken very carefully, taken slowly. And so the child element may not be prominent in your relationship early on, but it's something that will come probably later. But what I want to do is get into the depths of the pros and the cons that can come with this opportunity. I've gone on a little bit about the cons, and I'll summarise them in a more succinct way. But let's actually focus on what can be good about dating someone with children, because I think from what I hear or what I see in comments is that people are like, I couldn't, I wouldn't. And I have been there in that mindset. And it's okay to make that decision as long as you know why it is and what impact it has on your dating pool. But for people that are in the middle, or that want to reconsider and make sure that they're committed to saying, no, I don't want to date someone with children, just listen to this and see if it makes you think differently, or if it goes, those pros don't matter to me. The beauty of someone already having children, particularly coming from someone that has said, I don't want children of my own, is that you don't have to have children of your own. Yet you get this experience of children, of family life with children, and this whole concept of raising children but not being the ones that are actually raising them. It's the same thing that I observe if you are an engaged aunt in your niece and nephew's life, or if you are godparent or honorary aunt or godparent. You know, the person that doesn't actually have an official title, or the people that you used to call auntie or uncle, yet they're not even related to you. You get that same experience. The experience of enjoying children, but not ultimately being responsible for them, and being able to give them back, or to just be hands off at certain points and be like, that's not my job. Because as a parent, it kind of is always your job. And if they're kicking off at school, if stuff's going on, if you're not doing things you're meant to do, you're accountable. Financially, you're accountable. Whereas when you are dating someone that has children, when it comes to meeting the children, you get the experience of that aspect, yet you don't have full responsibility. And that can be delightful. I have an inherent fear about being pregnant, don't love that idea. And so that takes that worry away from me. And then it also allows you to settle this idea around, do you want kids or not yourself? Because you get to see what the reality is, and you are going to be part of that reality without having to commit to having children of your own. You can get to experience and hear, even before you meet the children, what it's like to have children. One of the things that I realised that is in my friendship circle, I didn't really have anyone that had had children that I was particularly close to. So when one friend became pregnant, I was like, tell me everything. As it happens, I want to know the good and the bad, because I want to be able to make this decision. I'm leaning towards no, and I want to know what your real experience is so that I can kind of verify that with myself, from one example at least. I want to see this and I want to experience it. I don't have experience around children of that age, babies probably more specifically so. We haven't got a lot of babies in our family. It's this concept of, could I do it if I really wanted to? Because I'm always open to changing my mind, even though I sit towards the no, because I see the benefit financially, freedom, time-wise, and the identity of mum is not necessarily something that I want. So it's this balance of verifying that. So when you then engage with someone that has children, you get to understand the workings of a parent, the things that they have to think about, and what needs to be a priority in the whole scheme of things. And then once you're meeting the children and starting to engage with them, you get the knowledge of what it is like. And that is going to determine for you if you wanted your own because you look and you go, I wish they were mine, or I wish I had a version of that was related to me, that I had given birth to. Or you go, I'm happy to do this, but I'm glad that there is a break for me, that this is not my 24/7, because children are 24/7. So that's something that you get the opportunity to do when you start dating a guy with kids. That means that you get to experience the idea of family life. And this can matter to a lot of people because it can offer the sense of belonging. Potentially your family don't have the strongest of links, or they do, and therefore that makes you want to have them, but you just don't want to have children yet or ever. And this is another element that actually you want in your life. You want to go out on day trips. You want to do those fun, cool, kiddie things that you you kind of get an excuse to be able to do when you've then got kids. Like going back to the zoo is an excuse. You go to the zoo as an adult, but there is a delight that comes with it when you've got that family life. And if that's a priority of yours or a value of yours, then you get to start elevating that without having to start your own. It's also going to show you that the person that you're dating hopefully has some level of good caring skills and responsibility skills. Now, we know that there are people in this world that are not the responsible parent that they should be, that they don't take care of their children effectively, that neglect them in some way, that disregard them, let them down. And all of this can be a really good observation for you throughout. So when you are trying to arrange dates, if you hear that they have had to cancel on having their kids, that's not good news. That shouldn't be happening, right? But that can show you. But if they say, look, I'm really sorry, I'm not able to do this weekend because I've got the kids this weekend, good communication skills, dedication to their children, and you understand as the person dating someone with children that that's just going to happen sometimes. And that is the normality of what being a parent or dating a parent brings with it. But these qualities can develop. Becoming a father for someone must be an experience. It is the experience of loving something unconditionally, and that enables some men to step up. It gives them a full purpose in life, and you get to see those qualities come out, the way they dote on their children, the way they talk about their children, much like we would observe someone talking about their ex, which also feeds in, but observe the way that they talk about their children and see what values matter to them. What is it that they do and what decisions do they make? How does their life work? You get to see this in the potential of someone that you're dating and learn about their qualities. Qualities that if you are planning for a family in the future are going to be useful, because if you're trying to meet someone that, whether they've got kids or not, you want children with too, you can't know if someone's a good dad without them already being a dad. You can put good bets on, you can see what they're like, but you would know. You'd be able to see that firsthand. You'd be able to hear about it initially, and then you would see them interacting with their children. And you could then make that judgment of what you would want it to look like if you were to have children in the future. All of this is an opportunity. Now, even if you don't want kids, it's still nice to see what a person's really like around children, and that kindness that they have and the fun that they can have, how they step into different roles. However, all of these scenarios come with the limitations that someone having a child brings. I've already mentioned the limit on life. Financially, children cost money. Not excessively even, but they do cost money, whether it's childcare, extra food, the limitation of the fact that if they're of school age, you're only going on holidays in the school holidays, which as a teacher isn't going to massively bother me. But that said, I design my life to be able to be free to go at other times. And I'll get into that in a moment. But it's something that you, as someone that may not have a link to a school timetable, hadn't really thought about. So then you're like, oh, it's going to cost like twice the price to go. Twice the price to go on holiday. Now, I'll caveat that with, it depends on how much they have the children. If they have the children all the time, that's going to be difficult to get around all for the majority of time. If you're 50-50, dependent on the relationship that the father has with the ex, there might be some flexibility to be able to get a week away in the non-school time. And it would be, and it is reasonable to go away without the children, as well as there being times where you do go away with the children. I think when you balance it, because you are starting to date someone that already has children, you never had the experience of you and them together without children. And therefore, people that did that the first time around, they maybe had 1, 2, 3 years where they were dating, were just a couple and then became children. So I don't think it's inherently wrong to want to go away together sometimes. And you could fit, if it's a half and half weeks, you can fit a 3-4 day trip away, going on weekend trips away or city breaks quite easily. The idea of a slightly longer sort of classic holiday, going all inclusive, going somewhere hot for a week, is going to either need flexibility from the other parent, or you do it within 3 or 4 days instead. And there's that limitation. So the limitation is either that you have to get someone's cooperation, and that can happen not just for holidays, but for other things too, but particularly a schedule. That's one of the biggest things. And then if you do want to go away, it's either got to be in the holidays, which may or may not be with the children, depending on the schedule, or you go on shorter breaks. And so it's got all of these implications for finances, for time. And this goes throughout the entire idea of engaging with someone that has children, because not only is it the impact on your schedule, but their schedule in general is more limited. When the children are around, it is much harder for them to be able to communicate with you. Their attention, rightly so, should predominantly be on their children and the home. That said, also, you should have a rightful place once you've established yourself. I mean they should be able to communicate with you enough in the first early stages of talking to you. There should be times when they can drop you a few messages so that you actually get this experience of learning about one another and obviously finding time to date. However, it is harder when the children are present. If they have the children to cook for, like a routine can be getting home from work, cooking dinner, having a bit of time with the kids, tidying dinner up, getting them ready for bed and the bedtime routine. And by then it's 8:30, 9 o'clock. We as the people that may not have children have to observe that very differently. That when I get home from work, which is earlier than normal 9 to 5, 4 o'clock, I have 4 till 10 or 11 o'clock to do what I want on most nights, unless I've got tutoring, unless I've got coaching. Someone with kids, and they're the only parent for that time, does not. They are blocked from the time they get home till 8, 9 o'clock, and that's if the child doesn't wake up in the night or do anything like that. And so your time comes later, and hopefully they can ping you a few messages here and there in between, but it's having that. So a con of this, therefore, is that their time is limited, and you will have to be able to manage that as you date them. And it could be good for someone with an anxious attachment style to learn that there's going to be a bit of pacing that's a bit different to normal, that it's going to take a little bit less time. But what this does is it increases your chances to be able to communicate effectively, because you're going to ask them, oh, when is it that I'll be able to speak to you? And they need to be able to say, well, from about 9 o'clock onwards, we can chat then if you like. So maybe you don't hear from them for a few hours, and that's when you address it yourself, because you know that they've said what's going on, what's happening. And that gives you an opportunity to work on yourself and the bits that are coming up for you. But ultimately, you are going to have to accept that that is going to happen at times. But time is that limitation. You will not be able to go on a date every week necessarily, dependent on your two schedules. So if you say I'm only around the weekends and they have the children every other, you're probably not seeing them. You're seeing them once every fortnight. That might suit you. It might not. And as time goes on, things can increase and be flexible dependent on the schedule that already exists for the children, because that does take priority. Not always does the family life take priority. It's all a fine balance that over time you develop this idea around, you get established more as a couple, and things start to work in a form of equilibrium together where no one is above anybody else. It's this, and there's not a hierarchy. It's just what needs to happen at the time. What are the pressing needs? What are the practical needs? What are the emotional needs of everybody that fit into that web of connections that is forming over time? But I don't think we should be writing off people that have children unless you have really contemplated what it will mean for you. This can be an opportunity to meet some lovely people that committed themselves to a person, to people that they thought they would stay with probably for a long time because they had children with. So it shows that they're readily people that want to commit and had that idea in their life at some point. Now, for some, the ending of a relationship, particularly when children, can be quite damaging, and that can change a person. But at the same time, it doesn't change everybody, and it can still be that their core values remain the same and they have the same desires that they did before to enjoy family life, to embrace the small moments and to create a life together with other people. That said, it's interesting to also explore the ideas around what you feel if you feel put off by someone already having children. What is it, beyond the limitations of finances, time and freedom, that you might feel internally? It's going to be interesting to hear from some of you that things that come up, that you weren't the first person that they loved, that they have committed to someone else before they committed to you, that they might love them more than they can love you. It's a big ask of someone, I believe, to take on someone that has children. And I'll go into that in another episode. What I wanted to do is scratch the surface of this idea of what are the pros and cons. What do you need to think about when you're contemplating it? And I can tell you there's been a lot of inner deep work because I wanted to make sure that I was making the right decision, not just for me, but for everybody else. I don't want to give anybody hope of something happening if I'm not sure about what this is going to look like in the future. I do not want to meet any children if I'm not sure about how this is going to go. And there's a point, you can only reach a certain level of certainty before you then go, well, I've got to take a plunge to then verify if that's exactly what I want. You can only know yourself so far in the projection of how you're going to feel, what you're going to want, to a degree that then you go, okay, hang on, no, I've made a mistake here, potentially. But ultimately, it's not all bad to date someone that has children. And the reality is more and more people will have them. So beyond some of these, think about what it is that really comes up for you. And if you have anything that's different that I haven't mentioned or something that you've explored as a result of this, drop me a DM on Instagram because I would love to hear what it is that goes, I don't like the idea of them having children. And if it's, if it's something that you're saying, I want to be child-free for my entire life and I don't even want half or alternate weekends to be filled with children, then so be it. That is right for you. I cannot tell you to make a different decision. That's not what I'm doing here. What I'm doing here is allowing you to make that clear decision for you right now, and you're entitled to listen back to this episode in 6 months, a year's time, 2 years' time, and change your mind and go, oh yeah, hang on, she did say that there was some good pros there, and I'd never really thought of it that way. I was so focused on the negative. But just take that idea, consider what it means for your dating pool, and what you really want for future life. And is someone already having a child the worst thing in the world? Let me know in the Instagram DMs what you're thinking about this topic. If you've ever dated a guy that's had kids and how it went. Maybe you're listening because you're just verifying it. You're in the early stages and you're dating someone with kids. And you're like, oh, but what about this? Drop me a DM. Let me know how it's going, the questions that you've got. Until next time, everybody, keep celebrating single life together.